Hi, Gretchen.
Hey, Allison.
How are you?
Good. We're having Ron just double check that he can share because, last time he didn't.
Wasn't able. Okay.
So,
Is he online with you or is he?
he was, and then we just rebooted, and now he's not.
Okay. Does my screen look okay in terms of? Okay.
Yeah, it's really good. And I'll shut my video off when we get going.
Yeah.
So.
And then once we get, like within 5 minutes, we'll put up the cover. Yeah, whatever.
You want me to
you
do
know
that?
what I'm talking about. Sure. Yeah, just we can have it up in case people do join early.
Yep.
And where is I want to just get my chat box open. There we go. And do you want to send me a test chat just to?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm a little frazzled because of the STEM election, and I'm not I'm just not feeling very good about it.
Right.
I'm trying to not watch anything this morning, and I honestly can't believe it. I really thought Biden would get this in a landslide. It's so unfathomable.
There's just so many people because we kind of live in a Portland bubble, and everyone's a Biden. Because I was thinking same thing, but yeah, you go outside of.
I know,
but
the polls were really wrong too. I mean, they really had him, winning by substantial margin, and it's just. I mean, there's still hope, but I think the path to victory it's really slim.
I know.
It's just unbearable.
It's scary, yeah. But
even Collins, I mean, we will survive. I have to just keep putting in perspective. Stuff still gets done, and but it's true. It just points to such a backwards direction for the country. It's
I know. I was trying to send on the new.
Well, if nothing else, you can run his slides, but
right. I can hear him fine.
That's the important thing. And poor Nicole having to run to the distillery. God only knows if we'll see her face or.
Did you see that I typed good morning to all the panelists?
Yes. Okay, good. Yeah. I'm going to have to remember to look at that. Although when I'm not speaking, it'll be easy to look at it. So it's,
Right.
It's all good.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I just resent Ron the invite, so hopefully. Okay.
And do you want to bring up our cover slide?
Yeah. Yeah. Share. There we go.
Okay, and then just maybe put the first one up. Okay, and then, oh yeah, we've got the notes on that.
I know.
Yeah, hang on. I think we can, oh yeah, remember there's a way to, go view it and then, let's see, go to view and then slide master. Oh yeah, there we go. There we go, right? I think that did it.
That's what I did last. So that was what it was on last time.
Okay.
And then,
oh yeah, get rid of notes. Okay. And then slideshow maybe? Yeah, then we still don't want that showing. Okay.
Interesting.
Go to slideshow though after you get rid of notes instead. Maybe that will see. And then no.
Can I do that?
Yeah. I guess that'll work. And then when you go to 2, let's slide 2 just to make sure we're in the same. Okay, that's good. All right. I think that'll work.
Okay.
Okay, so let's keep it on the first slide and we'll just leave that open as our, okay. And then when I'm going to go through a few housekeeping notes and the intros to the speakers. And then when I start going like, okay, a little bit about WSSA, then move the slide. I'll talk about our pillars. So leave it on this for the first couple minutes, and then we'll move to the next slide.
Let me get out of this for now. Because.
And then, yeah, do you have the other ones queued up just in case? Because you'll need to do Nicole's and.
I can't see. Can you hear me still? Yeah.
Yep.
Cecilia's on.
Oh, good. Oh, can I see participants? Let's see. Oh, yeah, 3. But they're all muted, right?
Okay, there we go. Still don't have Ron. Jump out. I'm gonna stop my video though.
Okay.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Does it sound too noisy?
No, sounds okay.
Okay, great. I'm going to put the phone on mute for the whole presentation till I start. I really apologize. We just had to go to this distillery and time got away. So.
No problem.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I leave my logo up instead of showing my face?
Yeah, whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Hi, Ron.
Good morning, Ron.
Good morning, Alison. I'm not going to say anything, don't worry. Yeah. I just want to make sure that in terms of my own share screen presentation. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. And good morning. I know we have a couple attendees that are already on the line and waiting. So we will kick this off exactly at 10 for any of you who are on the line. Just be patient and we'll be getting this going right at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
And Ron, you're looking good over there. You know, you got some sleep, whereas, you know, the people in the USA, we're suffering a little bit. There's Nicole.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Nicole.
Hello.
So I was saying earlier, I'm going to keep my video off. I apologize. I have to be driving. We had to go up to a distillery unexpectedly. So I'm just going to show my logo so people are like, oh, there's a sky outside.
You're definitely.
Hi, Rob.
Hello, Nicole.
You're definitely multitasking today, Nicole. So we just be careful on the road, okay? If you need to stop or, you know. Okay.
I'm not driving, so at least I've got that.
Okay. All right. Good.
Oh yeah,
Good,
that's
good.
right. You're in the UK. You're on the other side of the car. So
Exactly.
I got you.
I'm cheating. I'm cheating.
So, Alison, how's it feeling today?
I don't want to talk about it.
I mean, I've been telling people you need to be patient and you just need to watch trends in states and how and what votes they counted when, right? So, you know, you saw waves come up and down, and if you were following it minute by minute, it was an emotional roller coaster. So, you know, I think, you know, there's still votes to be counted, but I think if you're a supporter of Biden, you're probably a bit more optimistic now than you were at 3 a.m., right? I think, you know, there's still, you know, 1.4 million uncounted votes in Pennsylvania as of like 8 o'clock today, mostly the mail-in absentee votes. So, you know, even Fox News is saying that Wisconsin, Michigan, and Nevada and are leaning Biden now, and they've even called Arizona for Biden. So in some ways, if that all, I mean, not in some ways, if that holds, Pennsylvania is irrelevant.
Yep. So there is a path. There is a
There is.
path. Yeah. So
But yeah, I think you just have to be patient, and there's going to be lawsuits, right? So this isn't going to be over today.
Yeah.
Definitely not with the margins that we're going to see across 3 or 4 states. I think it's instead of one Florida, we're going to have 3 or 4 Floridas like in 2000. So
yeah. Gretchen, can you put up just the intro slide as we're getting participants joining on the line? And again, for our panelists, we'll have over 70 people on the line. So we've got, again, gradually people signing in. And we had just asked them to be patient for a few more minutes. It is now 9:55, so we will officially kick off in 5 minutes. And yeah, I'm sure everyone will be interested to hear some of the comments on the USA front as we get through this. But we will, yeah, we will just all be quiet for a few minutes as people join in. Good morning again to those waiting on the line. We're going to start in about 3 minutes, and you can see our panelists are ready to go here, but just be patient for a few more minutes and we'll kick off this webinar. And Ron, I'm going to tell you to put on mute so we don't have to listen to you typing while you're while you're waiting for us to start. We have a lot of participants rolling in for this webinar. As mentioned earlier, we have about expecting about 75 people on the line, and gradually people are joining. We will start promptly at 10, so we've got about 1 more minute to kick off. And thank you for all the attendees that are patiently waiting, and we will get started in just a minute. Very happy to see a lot of our friends and colleagues from overseas joining in. We've got people also from USA West Coast, very early in the morning there. Wide variety of attendees from lots of different locations. And again, people are rolling in and it is just about 10 o'clock. So we are going to kick off this webinar today. Just a good morning to all of you. Again, very early in the morning for some of you, and good afternoon to those of you overseas. My name is Allison Levitt. I'm the Managing Director of the Wine and Spirits Shippers Association, also known as WSSA or WSSA. We are very happy to welcome all of you to our webinar today. We have done quite a few webinars this year, and I think this one is very timely. We've got a lot of ground to cover today and great speakers. And so I'm going to keep the opening remarks pretty brief. It was a long night last night here in the USA. We are all still kind of on pins and needles as we watch the results of our presidential election and many House and Senate races as well. So excuse Rob and I if we're a little tired this morning. We've got a lot that we're looking at, and I'm sure it will really add some interesting aspects to Rob's talk today. So a few housekeeping notes to start. All of the attendees will be muted, but you can ask questions via the chat function. I think everyone is probably very familiar with Zoom at this point. The chat button is on your screen and you can be asking questions as we're going through the various presentations. I am going to try to hold off on answering the questions till the very end of our speakers. And if we don't get to all the questions, we will answer each and every one of you individually. I hope all of you received information that we sent out on our speakers with their brief bios, along with a link to the webinar. And as you can see, you have a lot of experience on the line today. To kick things off, I will provide a brief introduction to WSSA, and then Rob Marin will be our first presenter. Rob is the Vice President, International Trade at the Distilled Spirits Council of the US, DISCUS. He's worked with DISCUS for over 7 years, and he has been a key figure on Capitol Hill for many years and knows the intricacies of trade agreements inside and out. I look forward to Rob's take on the upcoming lame duck session in Congress and expected predictions, despite an unknown president at this time. Rob will be followed by Nicole Johnson, President and CEO of Rusty Rabbit International, a world-class management consulting and marketing firm with a fantastic spirits collection. Nicole is the youngest and only African-American woman-owned liquor importer, exporter, and distributor. She actually had to make an emergency trip to a distillery today, so we hope she will be able to see her face as she's returning from that distillery. But you know, business goes on every day, and you're dealing with, as we all deal with, crises every day. We're glad to have Nicole on the line with us. I had the pleasure of hearing both Rob and Nicole speak on the same topic earlier this year, and the pragmatic insights for all types of importers and exporters operating in the UK and EU markets, I think will be very helpful for everyone. We will finish up with Ron Crawford, Managing Director of Albatrans Glasgow. Many of you in attendance have had the pleasure of meeting Ron at other WSSA events, and he always manages to provide some humor to a discussion of a very complex situation. Ron has started in the logistics business, I think when he was in diapers, but very, very long time, and also was the managing director of a distillery. So he's got a take from both sides of the table. The Albatrans Glasgow, London, and Dublin teams have been working nonstop with shippers, addressing the individual and unique needs of each business. And Albatrans is the freight forwarding partner for WSSA. They are our boots on the ground in every wine and spirits production and import area. And again, I certainly couldn't do my job without the Albatrans team around the world. We know we will not answer all of your questions in this webinar, nor are all of the answers available yet, but we do hope to clear up some of the confusion and provide a channel for further discussion and any one-on-one conversations as needed. So just briefly about WSSA. I have been at the helm of WSSA for the last 7 years and previously was involved in strategic development in all aspects in the international shipping industry. I'm also a licensed customs broker, and in the last couple of years have been heavily involved in the work on the CBMA, the Craft Beverage Modernization Act, and helped a lot of people, I think, understand that particular law that has been very interesting for both producers and importers. When I started in the business, which again, many, many years ago, all we had to do to process a customs entry was run down to the customs house and hand the guys a small green card with the importer name. That was it. Times have certainly changed. I think in this last year, I really hate to use the word unprecedented. I think we hear that over and again. It's become ubiquitous over the last months. Everything is unprecedented, but it is true. This year is like no other. From politics to trade issues to the pandemic, we have never witnessed so many disruptions in so short a time. Associations such as WSSA and Discus have never been more important to sift through the issues and provide key insights to the industry. I talk to the leaders in the other industry associations often, and the collaboration has just been essential to all of us. We all have our skill sets, and working together, we've been able to, hopefully, like we do in this webinar, conquer some of the confusion. As noted here on this slide, WSSA has 3 core pillars. We are one of the oldest shipping associations in the United States, founded in 1976. And the first pillar was really where we started as an association, negotiating competitive freight rates, providing the best possible rates and services with carriers for our members based on using the volume of all of our members. Second core pillar is risk management. We offer what we feel is the best and largest risk management program for the beverage alcohol industry, ensuring cargo under all modes of transport, as well as on a stock throughput program. Our third pillar has become incredibly important over the last few years, just due to the chaos of trade in general. We are advocates. We provide education and intelligence to the beverage alcohol shipping industry. We normally do many live events, and we present seminars at Provine, at WSWA, at our own events. But as this is not viable in the current pandemic, we are actually very happy to go virtual and to bring our education efforts to an even broader audience. So that is what we are doing today. And really, with no further ado, I welcome Rob Marin to the screen and look forward to hearing his comments. Rob, all yours.
Great, thank you so much, Allison. Just let me share my screen and presentation. The awkward silence of the Zoom share. So again, Allison, thank you so much. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are around the world. For those of you who are not familiar with Discus, we are the leading U.S. national trade association representing producers, importers, marketers of distilled spirits. Our members account for approximately 75% of distilled spirits, U.S. distilled spirits exports, and 60% of spirits sold in the U.S. Our membership ranges from the large international companies that many of you are familiar with, so the Diageos, Brown-Formans, Beam Suntories, all the way down to the small craft distillers in the US, which we have about 140 craft distiller members in our association. And we also have a large and growing partnership membership program in which we work very, very closely with Allison and WSSA on a range of issues from the Craft Beverage Modernization Act to tariffs. And also for this call, we'd just like to let everybody know that we have a very strong collaborative working relationship with the Scotch Whisky Association and the Wine and Spirits Trade Association in the UK. So many of the issues that I'll be discussing, I think it would be safe to say in large part that the Scotch Whisky Association would be in lockstep with the positions that we take. And in my presentation, I just want to address 4 points. First, what is Brexit? Where are we today? I know Ron is much closer to this and he might have some things to add and or correct on that. Second is the relationship between Brexit and tariffs on US, on American whiskey and UK spirits. Third is an overview of how US-UK trade in spirits may or may not be impacted as soon as the UK leaves the EU single market customs union, whatever you want to call it. And fourth, what is the future of US-UK trade, the US-UK free trade agreement negotiations, and how the outcome of the presidential election may impact that. So just first, so what is Brexit? So as you all know, in 2016, the UK voted to leave the European Union. It left, I would say, the political aspect of the EU in January of 2020. However, what has not occurred and creates a bit of confusion for many people is that the UK has not yet left the EU's customs union. It is still part, in many ways, of the EU's common market. What does this mean for us as we talk about tariffs and FTA negotiations? Is that right now, the UK cannot unilaterally raise or lower its tariffs. Brussels is still in the driver's seat on that. And while the UK can negotiate trade agreements, which it is with the US, it cannot yet implement those agreements. Another big issue that's hanging over with Brexit and Iran is going to touch upon is what is the future relationship going to be with the European Union? Some of this ties into political considerations in the US for the future of a US-UK free trade agreement, and particularly how the Irish border is treated. And then a big issue for those of you who are exporting from the UK is that the UK will no longer be a part of the EU's bilateral or regional trade agreements. And I would say the UK is moving as quickly as it can to become members to replicate many of those agreements. But there will be some markets where tariffs may increase on UK products as soon as Brexit happens. So in terms of retaliatory tariffs, this has been an issue we've been working very closely with WSSA, and has been pretty much been my professional life for the last 2 years. There's 2 separate disputes here. First is related to US tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. And in response to those tariffs, the EU imposed a 25% tariff on American whiskey, which will increase to 50% in June in 2021. What has been the result of that? I'll show you some slides in a minute, but we've seen a 41% decrease in American whiskey exports to the EU. Now, the second dispute is kind of in two parts, and that's the Boeing Airbus dispute. This has been going on for 16 years. It's been across multiple administrations, Republican and Democrat. So the issue at the core issue in this dispute, civil aviation subsidies, is a massive issue, and one where we're hoping that there'll be a resolution soon. But in the case of the spirits industry, what does this mean for us? Why do we care? Well, in October of 2019, the US imposed additional tariffs sanctioned under the WTO on single malt Scotch, single malt Irish whiskey from Northern Ireland, liqueurs and cordials from the UK, and then also another, and I'm just kind of focusing on the UK right now, but also a range of other spirits products from the US. And we've seen, you'll see in some slides, a pretty dramatic decrease in US imports of those products since October of 2019. Now, in the EU's parallel case against the US, which is about 1 year behind the US case, in April of 2018, the EU has indicated in its list of products that it may impose tariffs on. It included rum, brandy, vodka, and wine. So there's a distinct possibility of a escalation in tariffs on US products. In August, the US and the EU are talking. They've both made some positive comments. There has been some breakthroughs, but earlier this month, the WTO authorized the EU to impose tariffs on $4 billion of US imports. And that was kind of finalized by the WTO on October 26th. Now the EU has said, the US has said, if the EU imposes tariffs on US products in this dispute, and again, this could be a whole webinar in itself, what's going on here, that the US will respond in kind. So there's a possibility of increased tariff rates on EU products if the EU moves to impose tariffs on US products. So kind of what's next? The EU has not issued its final list of US products. Now, until the UK leaves the EU's customs union, it will be bound by whatever decisions the EU makes in terms of tariffs. We understand that the EU is waiting to see the outcome of the election, and that if President Trump wins, we'll likely see its final list issued next week, and the EU will move pretty quickly, we understand, to impose tariffs. Now, we're not 100% clear of what's on its list, but we're very concerned that they will include additional US spirits. Now, the US, in its parallel case against the EU, every 180 days, and I know Allison is very familiar and probably hates carousels now, but many of you may have heard that term, but every 180 days, the US reviews and revises its list, the last of which took place in August. Did not make any changes to the US, to the EU, the list of EU products, but in February that's happening again. So we may see some changes to the US list. So just want to run through a few slides here. So starting in 1997, the US and the EU eliminated virtually all tariffs on all spirits from all countries. So that's on an MFN basis. So you can see on this slide, the dramatic increase in US spirits exports to the UK, the dramatic increase in American whiskey exports, and then boom, 2018, 19, and then you can see on the sidebar, the dramatic decrease in exports to the UK and how important the UK American whiskey exports are to the UK. So these tariffs are having a real impact on our industry. And, I would say that it's really impacting distillers of all sizes in the US, from large and medium distillers, large, medium, and small distillers alike. So just looking closer at US whiskey exports to the EU, you can see that the UK is one of the largest markets in the EU, and that we've seen similar decreases. And then again, on the lower right-hand side of the screen, just how dramatic of an decrease we've seen in 2020. And similarly, here you see how we've had a huge increase in American, US imports of UK products and mainly American whiskey. What we don't have on the actual graph, but you can see in the chart to the right, how the tariffs which were imposed in October 2019 have really resulted in a pretty big decrease in US imports of those products. Now, what is Discus been doing? So, we've been leading, I would say, 2 different coalitions that come together from time to time of the broad beverage alcohol industry, whether it's in the US. So in the US, we have importers, distributors, producers, retailers, the hospitality chain, wine producers, all the major spirits associations, all in opposition to US tariffs on EU products. We're also working very closely, you can see here, not just the Scotch Whisky Association, but also the EU Wine Association, Comité Van, and Spirits Europe, again, in strong opposition. There is no major, I would say, association in the US or the EU that supports any of these tariffs. We share the same message, urging the US and the EU to secure a negotiated settlement to immediately eliminate all of the tariffs. Now, Discus, Spirits Europe, and the SWA have put together, a spirit-specific proposal that, we're working, I would say, in dual channels. So one channel is on, with the EU and with our counterparts in Brussels, and then with the UK soon leaving the EU's customs union, in parallel, mainly with the Scotch Whisky Association between the US and the UK. We have a communication strategy. And for those of you who aren't participating in Spirits United and our Toast Not Tariffs campaign through Twitter, I urge you to look at that, Google Spirits United and Toast Not Tariffs. It's been a great grassroots platform where we had something like over 10,000 industry members submit comments to USTR in August in opposition to tariffs. And, just one thing, so you can see here the 0 for 0 agreement, which I mentioned before. The US and the EU and the UK, for that matter, have not had any tariffs on the spirits industry since 1997 up until the EU imposed its retaliatory tariff on American whiskey. And an important thing to note here is between the zero for zero agreement and distinctive product recognition, the spirits industry in particular is very integrated internationally with many US, I would say, companies that you think as US companies who are exporting bourbon, Tennessee whiskey, et cetera, who are also importing Scotch, cognac, Irish whiskey, et cetera. So oftentimes, and we've had to educate policymakers in both the US, EU, and the UK, when they think that they're hitting a EU company with tariffs on, say, Scotch or EU wine, they're also impacting US companies. And also that it's important to remember that tariffs are taxes that are passed to consumers, which have to be passed along to, and increasing prices, increasing jobs, or impacting jobs. So what is the future of the US and UK bilateral trade relationship look like? The US and the UK have been talking for over 2 years now, starting in like an executive working group on how to expand bilateral trade, and that kind of manifested itself earlier this year into the full-fledged launch of a bilateral free trade agreement. I would say talks are in a pretty advanced stage if you're looking at it just in terms of chapters being closed, issues addressed, but a lot of the hot button political issues have not been addressed yet. The US-UK is a top priority for the Trump administration. And again, seeking to resolve these retaliatory tariffs between US and UK as soon as it has, the UK has control over its tariffs is a top priority, and something that we're pushing very, very closely. So what are our priorities in a US-UK free trade agreement? Continued duty-free access from the US side, distinctive product recognition for American rye whiskey, American single malt, labeling, best practices and certification, rules of origin and transshipment. For those of you in the US and are familiar with the USMCA, we're pushing for those. I will say this agreement is not going to be completed this year. Obviously, it's not going to happen before the election. And if we have a change in administrations, which I just urge and everybody to be patient, it's going to take another day or two at least, and potential court challenges to that. But if there is a Biden administration, my sense is, they will push the pause button. They're going to push the pause button on all trade agreement negotiations, but my sense is they'll likely pick it up again. The Biden administration has made quite clear, or the Biden administration, sorry for the slip there, the Biden team in the campaign, and a lot of Democrats on Capitol Hill, particularly on the House side, have made clear that they will not support any trade agreement with the UK if there's major roadblocks put up on the Irish border, and the Good Friday Agreement is not, in their view, continue to be in place. I don't think that's an idle threat. I take that seriously. So pay attention to that, how that works out, especially if there's a Biden administration. And the key date to remember for a US-UK agreement, regardless of who wins the election, is April 1st of 2021. So in the US, there's a law called Trade Promotion Authority. Can go on for a long time about this issue, but basically the administration needs to work very closely with Congress on trade agreements and trade agreement implementing legislation. And in order for that legislation to be considered by Congress on a fast track, meaning Congress not being able to make any amendments to the legislation, it will need to complete the agreement by April 1st of 2021. So that's the real deadline. And I know this isn't a panel about Trade Promotion Authority, but pay attention to that next year for those in trade watchers. And that is the end of my presentation. So I will hand it back over to Allison, and I guess we'll take questions at the end.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Rob. You managed to make trade agreements at least somewhat understandable for everyone. And again, so much going on that we've got to be, watching so many moving parts. But thank you so much. And again, your support has been amazing for all the detailed questions that I'm always sending you. So next up, we turn to Nicole Johnson, and again, she will get into some of the nitty-gritty.
Hi, everyone. I apologize that I'm not able to show face. I'm on the road, but I still wanted to make sure that we were present. And this is obviously an important issue near and dear to us as we import and we export into 142 countries from the US and globally. And so with one of our major markets being the UK, the EU, and Ireland, we wanted to express, basically also what we tell our clientele, but what WSSA has been explaining. And I know that when it comes to the shipping, the import, the export, and the logistics, it's very confusing because some things have not been finalized and some have. So I'm just going to go over a few points just in relation of what Rusty Rabbit does and why this is an important issue for us. Here at Rusty Rabbit, we're a global brand management and business development agency. We take products from design and distribution, from prototype to promotion and concept to completion. And then we help you move those in and out of each market and expand your presence globally. So when you're in the spirits industry and you're already trying to figure out your costs, your distillations, your packaging, your labels, your corrugate, your shipping weight, and all of that, it's very trying now to figure out, like, oh man, we finally figured out the international market, and now we have Brexit coming, and now there's some changes that come in that of what can go to the EU, what can only be in the UK, and then having kind of the synopsis of Ireland where they're still staying within the EU. So the UK, as Rob explained earlier, the UK left the EU on January 1st of 2020, and we officially leave the customs union on December 31st of 2020. We will see a return of EU duty-free, but COVID has halted this opportunity for now due to airlines and travel being closed. The duty suspension impact has mostly to do with the UK global tariff, because that replaces the EU's common external tariff, and that of course starts in January 1st. The one caveat in there is the Northern Ireland Protocol, as the only land border between the UK and the EU, and as an unmarked border without checks, and it will also remain that way. So Northern Ireland will maintain the EU's custom rules and follow its product standards, known as a single market on goods. Now, in moving product into the UK and forwarding it onto the EU, there is 11,830 new mandates. Will everyone know all of them and be ready for all of them and all of that by December 31st? No, but between the 4 companies and organizations on this call, we can of course significantly help you. This majorly has to do with bonded warehouses, the free zone, and then there's an onward supply relief. There's been a request for 2 years that the current stock that is held in the UK and in the EU markets be allowed to be used so that they are able to flow freely as they have been, so that it's not such a cost prohibitive juncture and gesture on the brands to make sure that they're still able to import and export throughout. We don't want people to be in fear, as it is something that can be quite inundating and overwhelming, but mostly it has to do with, and Ron's going to get to this later, in regards to how the shipping and the logistics work. So I'm going to stay in my lane and pretty much talk about the packaging and moving product in between these 2 countries. On my next slide, I kind of talk about the labeling impacts. It's mostly in making sure that, again, they want to know the name and the address of the suppliers on the bottles. Most of all of them are already done this way. The country of origin, whether it be France, and then if you're doing blendeds, they would like to know the blend of if it's a wine or a spirit. So say it was a wine that's from Italy, Spain, and Portugal, that would now need to be on the label, before when you could just say blended spirit, blended wine, blended whiskey. We have one client that has an Irish Channel whiskey. Half of the whiskey is from Ireland, and then they're doing a mixture of it with their bourbon. So now that has to be explained on the label. Of course, the quantity stays the same. You'll, of course, always have to put, if it's a 700 milliliters, 750 milliliters, 700, depending again if you're in wine and spirit. And then, of course, you have to have your alcoholic strength by volume if it's over 1.2% ABV. So that has to be clearly stated. One of the major changes in the labels is the allergen declarations. Before, that wasn't something that had to be on the bottle, but now it does. So, for instance, licorice is now being described as an allergen for labeling purposes. So, if you have in the UK that we normally do, and it's also in the EU, we send out a spreadsheet that has an allergen declaration, and we literally just ask you for all the ingredients that are in your products, and then we go through the list to make sure that that is able to come into the country, or whether or not you do now need to put that on your bottle. So going forward, making sure that you can get that list from me. I am sure that Allison will give out the email address, but if not, you can go to gov.uk. They have it as well. If you type in like what the allergen notifications are, or what those will be, so that you know what now needs to go on the label, so it doesn't get stopped and you don't have any issues. One of the biggest advocates that we have in the UK and the EU is the Portman Group, and they have been really advocating on behalf of labeling and behalf of the changes, and making sure that, again, there's an extended time, and the fact that you're able to use the current labels if you already have product here. If you don't have product here, obviously you're going to have to change it. But if you already have product in the EU, UK, they have been advocating quite strongly to make sure that you're in a position where you don't have to go and replace that stock or withdraw that stock. A lot of us have already changed the labels to already be conducive to the EU and UK market, having the units on the back, having drink aware on the back, making sure that you know the units available, the daily recommended units, and things of that nature. So it would be fairly difficult for entities to have to withdraw all of their stock from over here and then send it back to where their origin countries are. They have tightened on the drinking guidelines. So now you need to have the recommended weekly drinking, single session drinking, and pregnancy and drinking notifications on your labeling. WSTA has asked for an additional 2-year post-implementation period. This will allow for existing supplies to be depleted. If this is not accepted, all stock on shelves will need to be replaced or relabeled on January 1st of 2021. This is still up in the air and has not been decided, unfortunately. And yes, I do know that today is November 4th, but it's really an ongoing battle that's been going back and forth. To function between markets, it will require that both UK and EU-based businesses. So for instance, our organization has an entity in Ireland and has an entity here in the UK and has an entity in Germany. And so the companies that you're going to be working with, they do have to have a synonymous company that is in both sides so that the pass-throughs can be seamless throughout. To function between markets will also require both UK and EU-based bonded warehouses. Again, some of the things that we have done for our company is we have a bonded warehouse in the States. We have one here I'm in London, here in the UK. We have one in Ireland, and we have one in the Netherlands. We've also acquired additional ones in Australia, Japan, and South Africa, making sure that product is able to move seamlessly throughout. Because one of the things that you don't want to do is have to send your product from the States to the UK or to the EU and it not be under bond, because you would have to then pay your duties and taxes at that time. And so that normally deals with people's cash flows, and we also want to make sure that you're able to be successful in your business. The V1I form, the grace period has been extended. This pretty much applies to wine and the labeling that's in with that, and so that has been approved and extended. And I don't know when the change of that will come in, but for right now on January 1st, that's not something that has to change. Rob pretty much covered the US UK trade overview, so I'm not going to repeat it. But mostly I just wanted to say that this isn't necessarily something that should strike fear or make you not want to move into the international markets. But again, you've got 4 entities here on this call that of course can help you and guide you through that. So with that said, I'm going to pass it back to Allison and then let everyone carry on.
Nicole, thank you so much. And thanks for joining us despite having to drive around and actually go out to a distillery. So appreciate very much, again, some of those nitty gritty details. And I think that key point of, yeah, this looks chaotic, but and every business is unique. And I think that's something Ron will reiterate. There is not a one size fits all for doing business internationally at this point. And again, really appreciate the willingness to participate in this panel, as well as putting yourself out there as a resource. And that's where, when I was talking earlier about the type of collaboration and information sharing, it is just incredibly important during these times. So with that said, we will move it over to Ron and probably get a little geography lesson in the midst of this. But Ron, thank you so much for joining us, and we're looking forward to your remarks. And you are on mute, Ron. So you are, pulling the typical Zoom situation here, and there we go. Okay.
So Gretchen, if you can just get through the slides for me, because they're not loading from my own screen here.
Scotland, you're way behind in technology, and we'll try to help you out here.
We're so organized with Teams that Zoom's always a challenge to us. So Gretchen, do you have access to those?
There we go.
Great. Okay. So just from the beginning, Gretchen, I'll talk you through each of those. So just to give everyone a background to Brexit and what it means from a UK perspective, if we look at the first slide, the European Union is the UK's biggest single trading partner. And to give you an idea just how big and how important it is, in 2019, it accounted for 43% of exports and 51% of UK imports. So as an EU member, the UK was part of the customs union and part of the single market. That means until the end of this year, there are currently no tariffs on goods traded between the UK and EU, and minimal border checks. And just to give you an idea how easy things are operating within the EU, I've used this term at various WSSA meetings before. Exporting a container of Scotch whisky from these parts to any member country of the EU is as simple as posting a letter. The origin warehouse would check the details of the receiving warehouse. The container would move under the guarantee and the bond of the dispatching warehouse. And when the container was electronically received at destination, the guarantee was discharged. So that has worked perfectly in both directions since we joined the EU 47 years ago. The risk we have, though, is if we go to a no deal situation, we then go to WTO, World Trade Organization terms. Now, the World Trade Organization covers 164 member countries, and at this stage, the benefits don't seem to match those of being a member of the EU. Other countries trading with the EU in World Trade terms include the USA, China, and Brazil, pretty significant economies. But for some of these big countries, for example, the USA, they will sign agreements with the EU on specific sectors. And the USA is a good example of that. That has signed agreements for at least 20 products, covering everything from wine to bananas to insurance and to the energy efficiency labeling of certain products. Australia, on the other hand, has one or two smaller deals with the EU, and mainly in wine, which is a key export from the EU. And Australia has been trying to negotiate a trade deal with the EU since 2018. These things do take time. So if the UK continues decides to trade on world trade terms, I think that will be a real challenge for UK importers and exporters. The UK government's trying to put a positive spin on it. They're telling us that if we don't get a deal with the EU, we will trade on what they're calling an Australia-style deal. Now, that's just fancy words for a no-deal situation. For Australia, if you transplant that for Albania, because it's the same terms, there is no significant deal between Australia and the EU, so we would be on basic terms. It's also important to consider the geography. You know, Australia, it can take 30 or 40 days for goods to arrive here by sea freight. If you look at goods leaving the UK to go to France, for an example, the closest points, Dover, Calais, the distance is 20 miles, 19 sailings per day, 1.5 hours sailing time. That's how quickly goods can get to market within the UK.
Ron, are we behind on slides? Hate to interrupt, but
no, I'm just going through.
oh, okay, good. Just want to make sure, since I know you're not controlling your screen. Thank you.
So, in terms of the EU, the UK relies so much on it for just-in-time operation for the supply chains, for food, for pharmaceuticals, and for cars. And in later slides, I'll give you an example of how difficult this is going to be. In 2013, our UK Prime Minister foolishly promised a referendum on Britain's membership of the EU. He had to deliver that, and in 2016, by 52 to 48%, the UK voted to leave the EU. The trigger was pulled in March 2017, giving us a 2-year grace period, after which we would leave the EU. The first official departure date was March 2019, and to no one's surprise, we did seek an extension. That was granted for 6 months. In October 2019, we had to ask for another extension. So as we prepare for the final Brexit, from a UK shippers and importers perspective, this is actually the third Brexit we have gone through. UK shippers have already put stacks of stock into European markets in anticipation of Brexit, only to find it was a false alarm. So this one is real, and there's no stopping it. So Gretchen, if you can go to the next slide, please. We are 90% of the way towards a deal with the EU, but the last 10% is proving very, very troublesome. The close-off date for negotiations was the 15th of October, after which our Prime Minister Boris Johnson said there would be no further negotiation. Here we are into the early part of November, and we're still negotiating, so much so that Michel Barnier, a key member of the EU Commission, he has been appointed as the European Commission's head of task force for relations with the United Kingdom. Now, how on earth he ever gets that title on a business card, I'm not sure, but he is a regular in the UK at the moment, going through high-level discussions with the UK in an effort to go over these 3 final hurdles. The first of which is fisheries, seems pretty straightforward. Britain being an island and a series of small islands around it, UK territorial waters are pretty significant. But as a member of the EU, by value, France catches around 1/3 of the fish in the UK waters, followed by Holland at 16% and Ireland at 14%. So over 60% of fish caught within UK waters is from non-UK trawlers. So that's something, understandably, the UK is looking to have addressed. The second is a level playing field, because if the UK wants to sign an agreement with the EU, it's on the understanding that the UK will not provide state subsidies to certain industries, which again is pretty straightforward. The UK signed the agreement, and then within a matter of weeks, we had published an internal market bill which contained provisions on state aid, and straight away that started alarm bells ringing with the EU. And lastly, governance. If there's any dispute, if we decide we reach a deal with the EU and there's the governance issue, we have to decide who has the final word on that. The EU wants a role for the Court of Justice of the EU. The UK quite categorically does not. So that is a key sticking point. And if we can address these three issues over the last 8 weeks of 2020, we will have a deal with the EU. Gretchen, next slide, please. The Irish backstop was deemed to be the biggest trouble spot in terms of an agreement. We actually overcame that very, very difficult hurdle. Now, Northern Ireland, as a part of the UK, has a foot in both camps. As Nicole mentioned earlier, there will be no hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. Goods moving from the UK to Northern Ireland will be subject to no tariffs. From the north of Ireland to the Republic of Ireland, those will operate under EU rules. And the only difficulty at this stage is UK customs are still trying to decide on goods moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, under what documentation should that move, because there is still the risk that those goods operating within Great Britain could end up in the Republic of Ireland, so ending up in an EU country without any taxes having been paid. So we're just 8 weeks away, but that one still has to be finalised. And if we go to some general customer questions, Gretchen, the feedback we've had is what we're asking customers on Incoterms. These will change quite dramatically under a deal or no deal Brexit. In terms of imports at the moment, ex-works, FCA seems to be the option. FCA is the preferred importer option at the moment. In terms of export, CIF's looking common, but also free on board, carriage paid to, free carrier. But again, just 8 weeks away, some major exporters within the UK have still to finalise and agree what their final terms will be. Nicole touched on also the regulation changes in terms of labels, UK companies having a distributor or agent within the European Union. These have to be addressed, and I think the EU will grant a grace period in terms of labels, etc. The sale of stock, which is lying in the European Union already, because at the moment, major UK exporters are piling stock, basically Q1 stock for 2021 is being piled into Europe to avoid any problems in the early part of 2021 as customs struggle to deal with these problems. That obviously introduces port delays, avoiding trouble spots, the roll-on, roll-off ferries towards the south of the UK, going to France primarily or Belgium. Those are likely to be hit with the worst problems and the delays. And just to give you an idea of the potential delays, Michael Gove is a senior UK government minister, and only recently he warned that for the port of Dover, that queues of up to 7,000 trucks could be expected. Now, if 1,000 trucks would stretch for 11 miles, it gives you an idea that whole stretches of major motorways in the UK will be closed and clogged by laden trucks looking to export UK products into the EU. So that is something, even at this late stage, we're not seeing any comfort in terms of export routes. From a Scotch perspective, we will look to use northern ports in Scotland, possibly Grangemouth, or European ports, ferry ports such as Hull, Immingham, Teesport, or Grangemouth. But again, I think the UK government has to look closely at the congestion that could come to the southern ports from the 1st of January. And again, the knock-on effect from that will be carrier and equipment availability. So we have to ask ourselves how we can guarantee access to space and equipment pre and post Brexit. But the no deal will definitely bring significant delays on export and import traffic. And then that will have a knock-on effect to UK exporters who are struggling to backload equipment that was coming to the UK. So as I mentioned earlier, UK shippers are trying to get around this by putting Q1 2021 stock into Europe at the moment. we're obviously talking about wines and spirits, but to give you an idea of the problems this is going to cause for the UK trade in general, we will switch to the car trade, which is a significant part of UK manufacturing. And this will give you an idea of the potential problems and delays we could face. BMW Mini is a common car known to many people, an iconic British car, now owned by BMW. But at the moment, they are importing 120 trucks per day from the European Union, using 3 million parts and operating on a just-in-time supply chain. So any delay to those 120 trucks at UK or French border points will cause significant problems with production to BMW Mini. Again, it will also affect carriers with a shortage of trucks, containers on imports, which will have an effect on exports also. And the next slide, also for a Jaguar Land Rover, same thing again. Up to 50% of their production, the materials come from the European Union. If there is no deal, there is a further complex.
Ron, we've lost you for a minute. There we go. You're coming back. You were frozen for a second. I think you're with us again.
Oh, did you? Okay. I'll just go over that again. If there is a no deal, there is a threat of a 4.5% tariff on parts coming from the EU, and for built cars going back to the European Union, there would be a 10% tariff. Now, there is a real risk that these could make UK products uncompetitive. So that's why a deal is absolutely crucial. And finally, on the subject of cars, another major manufacturer in the UK is Honda. Now, Honda have actually advised that, again, just-in-time production, for Honda to hold 9 days production stock, primarily coming from the European Union, they would require to build a warehouse of 300,000 square meters. So actually one of the biggest buildings in the UK, just to hold 9 days stock. So a no deal, heavy delay at UK or continental border points will cause real difficulty to UK manufacturing and international trade. So if we move on to some other bits and pieces relating to Brexit, and it's not all negative, the UK global tariff will kick in from the 1st of January 2021. The positive example that Nicole touched on earlier was the V1 certificate covering imported wine. That will be suspended until the 1st of July 2021. And that was driven by the Wines and Spirits Trade Association within the UK. And they made a comment this week that if this document was abandoned completely for future trade, it would offer a real boost to the UK wine industry, which imports 4.4 billion every year for the Exchequer and supports 130,000 jobs. So there's a positive thing that the UK is doing in terms of imported wine from Europe. On the negative side, we currently import, for example, glass bottles from France, duty-free as part of the EU. From the 1st of January, under a no-deal arrangement, a 5% tax will apply. So again, there would be a benefit of reaching a deal with the EU to keep the status quo. Target examples for future trades, and Rob and Nicole touched on this also, the UK is keen to see the removal of the 25% tariff on single malts going into the USA, and in reverse, we would remove the 25% tariff on American whiskies and bourbon coming into the UK. That is a target of the UK government, and I think they will actively address that during the early parts of 2021. So, trying to leave on a positive note, some people think that Brexit will be a disaster for everybody. Some are for, some are against. We still have a few challenges to overcome. Customs are not quite ready for it. Carriers are not quite ready for it. There is still a feeling of we don't know and we're only 8 weeks away. But we can assure you that from an Albatrans perspective, from a Scotch whisky perspective, and from a UK perspective, we are ready to face the challenges of Brexit. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ron. And again, all of these tidbits from each of our speakers helps to put the whole picture together. We have actually I've gotten an email of a few questions that have come up, and I'm just going to throw them out. We have a couple minutes for questions. There have been US importers who have had questions about feeder vessels, for example, shipping out of Ireland on a feeder vessel into Liverpool. Is there any expectation of delays or problems in those, feeder ports? Ron, do you want to answer that one?
I would say very unlikely. If you equate that to goods shipping from the UK to the USA at the moment, going out with the European Union, the feeder vessels could go from Grangemouth to Rotterdam. The container lands on the quays, transshipped at Rotterdam, and does not touch Dutch customs territory, just as the container coming from Ireland, transshipping in Liverpool would not touch UK customs territory. So that would be a straightforward export under a Dublin USA bill of lading. It's not a Dublin Liverpool bill of lading, it would be a Dublin USA bill of lading. So we don't anticipate any problems there.
And I guess that's the general feeling for, say, the USA market is that the deep sea ports, the shipments going from UK or Ireland or Northern Ireland into the USA should not really be impacted? Or is there still a feeling that if the traffic is really jammed up and you can't, get to the ports, or the rail is jammed, should we expect delays over the next few months or into the beginning of the year? Or is it more the, just really the EU traffic going into the EU and out of the EU?
The main deep sea ports from the UK, which would be Southampton, Liverpool, Felixstowe, London Gateway, are not expected to encounter. Those are traditional deep sea ports. The ferry ports, like I mentioned, Dover, Immingham, Hull, Teesport, these are more likely to be affected. So intra-European traffic tends, not exclusively, but tends to stick to European ferry ports, and deep sea goes through deep sea ports within the UK and to a certain extent Europe also. Rotterdam is a deep sea port. Zeebrugge is more of a ferry port. So yeah, we're not expecting the deep sea ports to be affected.
Okay. And Rob, back to you on the WTO situation with the unknown impact of, depending on the administration that is in charge. It does seem like that will play a heavy role in what the EU will do in terms of retaliatory tariffs on USA products. With that said, and back to the carousel, the next carousel date in February for the potential change or increase in tariffs on EU products. It would the feeling, and I think you answered this, in February of 2021, will there be dependence on the US-UK free trade agreement in terms of determining if products from the UK will be exempted from those current Airbus tariffs, or where does that stand?
Ooh, it's the multi-million-dollar question there. I think if there's a change in administrations and a Biden, and if there's a change in administration, we don't have a US-UK agreement sewed up, even if it's just on the tariffs under the current Trump administration. And a Biden administration would come into, the inauguration is on January 20th and the carousel is on like February 8th and change, something like that. I think, it's going to take several months for a Biden administration to staff up the relevant agencies in the US that would review it. I think what a Biden administration, again, this is just a guess, so it's as good as anybody else's. My sense is that a Biden administration would not make any changes in a carousel. I think we would continue to see tariffs, US tariffs on EU and unfortunately probably UK products for some time. And it's not because I don't think a Biden administration would change its negotiating tactic, have take a different approach with the EU and the UK. It's just the logistics in, you know, getting the administration up to date, or sorry, staffed up and everything. So my sense, if there is a change in administration, we would first see the steel and aluminum tariffs removed, because Biden is, you know, much more in favor of the multilateral trading system. He was on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He was the chair of that for years. So he's definitely an internationalist. Whether you think that's good or bad, that's up to you. But, you know, he sees NATO as being important. So I can see those tariffs being removed quickly. I can see as a result, you know, the bourbon, the EU and the UK's tariffs will be removed. If we see a Trump administration, in some ways, I think with the UK, it's more likely that we would see some agreement by the end of this year. I mean, I hope that a Biden, USTR under a Trump administration, even if Biden wins, will continue these negotiations with the UK and secure a US-UK agreement. We're certainly pushing for it. It's just a bit more complicated. And I know that probably doesn't answer the question directly, but in some ways it's easier if Trump wins. Expect things to get worse. I mean, that's my opinion.
All right.
With
Well,
Biden, it's just a little more complicated with timing and stuff like that. But it will get better, is my bet.
well, fingers crossed on that front. We're all keeping an eye on that. There is another very specific question on some labeling, which we will actually get back to you offline, because we are at the end of our hour. And if nothing else, I like to keep these webinars to the exact time. So we will get back on that question. Thank you all very much. Our panelists are just amazing to give us their time on this. Just every day is hectic these days, but really appreciate it today of all days. And thank you all for attending. We will be continuing to send out updates as hopefully things settle down. And we will probably be hosting more webinars as things, again, shape up and we have more direction in the future. And in the meantime, any questions at all, reach out to us and we'll get you connected with the answers as best as possible, as best information as available today. Again, thank you everyone. And we will all see you on the other side. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you. Bye-bye.